in 2013, when I was reporting on the Snowden documents with Glenn Greenwald, Glenn and Jeremy Scahill and I all talked about wanting to work together and to team up. And in that conversation, we were looking at different options, and we were approached by Pierre Omidyar, who was interested in separately in getting involved in news reporting. So we decided to work together. And in those initial conversations that I had with Glenn and Jeremy, I said that what I really wanted to do was to commission short-form nonfiction films that would be responsive to the world and that could happen in a much faster turnaround than I do in long form. And partly it's inspired by some of the work that I'd done with the New York Times in doing short films. And as someone who does long form, where you're in the field for, oftentimes over a year, and it takes such a long time to turn things around, it's really exciting to be able to work in different ways. Mm-hmm. So when I was in the sort of final stages of editing, then I started reaching out to people to build this team with this idea of having a small commissioning team that would then commission broadly from both in the US and internationally. So I first reached out to AJ last summer, and then we both talked to Charlotte, who was at that time curating at Hot Docs. So then we started having these conversations about how we wanted to do it, what we were interested in, what we were going to look for, and then we, I think, pretty much went sort of deep in about March is when we started, really starting to think about it. But we didn't want to announce it until we actually had content ready to share. So we kind of kept it low profile in those months so that we could then announce and then show the work.
Mm-hmm. So last night you showed 5 or 6 pieces. You showed some from Asylum, which was, from what I read, part of CITIZENFOUR at one point, but then you decided to make it 2 separate movies, correct?
I mean, I wouldn't describe it as part of CITIZENFOUR. Mm-hmm. So what happened when I started filming with Julian Assange in 2011 and did an extraordinary amount of filming with him, 2011, 2012. And then when I was ready to edit, I relocated to Berlin, and partly because I was having this experience where I was being stopped at the border. So it was a place to edit and not worry about the footage being confiscated, because there is an actual ongoing grand jury investigation into the work that WikiLeaks does. So I was there, and that's when I was contacted by Snowden. Mm-hmm. So it was not an expected thing, and then that film, when I was working with an editor, Mathilde Bonfoy, in Berlin, and we did the first assembly, which had more of the material with Julian, and we just realized they were just different projects, and they deserved their own space. Uh-huh. So they kind of departed there.
So some of the first season of Field of Vision is going to include
right. Yeah. For those who are I'm now working on returning to the material that's focused on Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and I'm approaching it as an episodic that will be done in chapters.
Mm-hmm. So aside from Asylum, the way you describe it is that you find filmmakers and you kind of finance them into action, essentially. So the other pieces that were shown last night, can you take one as an example and tell us how that came?
I'll kick that over to AJ.
Together, yeah.
Yeah, sure, but which one? I feel like I'm playing favorites. Yeah, tell me.
Why don't you do Birdie? First of all, tell us a little bit about Birdie, what it's about.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's actually a good example and different from the other films. So Birdie is one of actually 2 films that we made about homeless in Brazil and the relationship that they have with their dogs. And it actually comes out of an editorial meeting that was at the Intercept, and Glenn Greenwald wanted to write about this story and about this relationship. And immediately we thought that's something that we would love to do either one film or 2 about. And so we reached out to Eloisa Passos, who is an extraordinarily talented cinematographer. For those of you who've seen Jason Cohn's Mandabala, Send a Bullet, from a few years ago, she shot that. And she also, I think she did something for you on CITIZENFOUR.
She did a couple shoots for CITIZENFOUR and in Rio. Yeah.
Yeah. So we reached out to her, and she was working on a project, and it was just kind of finding the right timing for it. She went out and shot in August, and got both of these stories and then was quickly editing. So the turnaround for her was, for a lot of the films were still shooting last month. So there was a pretty quick turnaround. That's the only one of the 5 that we showed last night that has an editorial component to it. The others are also the only one that's a multi-part. The other ones are standalones, and I think in all the cases, 3 of them were projects where we thought something interesting was happening in the world, and we asked a filmmaker to go out and explore it in their own way, in their own artistic sensibilities. And the only other exception is Eva Divojevic. Her film Notes on the Border. We'd actually assigned her a different project, but it seemed like it wasn't sort of developing in the way that we wanted to, and she was like, this migrant crisis is happening in Europe, and I would really like to do something about that. And we were like, yes, go. So hers changed into the film that she ended up making.
So you're going to do 40 to 50 movies in a year. First of all, is there a time limit you're trying to keep them within? They're probably very short, but is there a can they not be as long as 30 minutes, or are you trying to keep it?
I think if we went to 30, we would ask the filmmaker to see if it is something that could be multi-part.
Okay.
Does it make sense that it would be split into 2 or 3 films?
Okay. All right.
We're certainly interested in episodic filmmaking, in thematic filmmaking. We aren't afraid of telling a longer story, but one of the things that really excites us about this in terms of longer work is approaching things from an episodic perspective, which actually means that an episode has to have a different kind of rhythm. There needs to be a beat at the end that sort of puts a bit of a period or maybe just a really strong comma on the end, and encourages you to want to come back and see something else. I think that's a really thrilling thing as a filmmaker, to think differently about how you tell the stories, and we're excited to engage people in that way. But we also realize that a lot of people watch these things on their phones or on tablets or on laptops, and a lot of times when you click on a video, the first thing you do is look down at the bottom to see how long it is going to be, and then we don't want people to look down at it and go like, I just don't have that kind of time.
Charlotte, maybe you could first of all, I'd like to answer this question. So to do 40 to 50 movies a year, it seems like that requires a huge database of filmmakers. Where are you getting those filmmakers? How are you cultivating them?
I'm lucky in that I came out of Hot Docs, and so for the last 4 years, even just showing the films we've shown, I've come across between 800 and 1,000 filmmakers that we showed their work in Hot Docs. So I have, and I also love talent scouting and looking for new voices, and so that's something that I already kind of bring to this. But also, we love talking about different perspectives and different ways filmmakers are going to tackle it. So, as much as we're looking for filmmakers, we're also looking for cinematographers and editors and different views and different styles. So, we're doing a lot of research and also people are reaching out, which is really lovely. After we kind of announced that we were doing this, we've had a huge influx of people reaching out to us, and seeing how they're interpreting it even before they've seen the films has been really interesting to us too.
At what stage should filmmakers reach out to you? You don't acquire stuff that's already shot, do you? Or
no, it depends. If they have material that's already shot but they haven't maybe used it or want to use it in a different way that's now timely or speaks to something that's happening now, I think we'd be really open to that. But they can reach out at any stage. I think we're interested if they have an idea. We're also going to be still doing commissions in the way of assignments. So if people are just eager to do something, that would be really interesting, because the filmmakers we've just had, the nature of the launch meant we were assigning, and they found that very freeing to not have to bring the subject matter to the table. So I think we're interested in filmmakers who want to do that too.
Laura, you said you're interested in pairing filmmakers with journalists who are already covering a particular story, a particular beat. So how would that work?
I mean, I can give you a concrete example. It's actually it's a film that I was involved in that we published before we launched Field Division. So there's a journalist at the Intercept, Peter Moss, who had access to Stephen Kim, who was being prosecuted under the Espionage Act, and he was sentenced, and he was preparing to basically surrender and go to prison, and he had access to him in the weeks before. And so he told me that, and I said, well, this is the kind of filmmaking that I'm really interested in. Let's pair you up with a filmmaker. So Peter had the access. He did a very lengthy written piece that went into what's going on with how the Espionage Act is being used in recent years, and talked about many different examples of it, and particularly Stephen Kim. And then the film really follows Stephen as in the weeks before he goes into prison. So it was an example of how where access being at the right in the right moment to really see something that was obviously clearly dramatic when you see somebody kind of closing down their life and what had happened in this case, which was really an injustice. I mean, this was somebody who worked for the State Department and was encouraged to speak to a journalist, and then the government investigated both the journalist and the source in this case, and the journalist was described as a co-conspirator by the government, and their phone records were taken. So it was a really interesting story to cover, and the kinds of themes that I'm interested in. So that's kind of an example of how getting in early and trying to tell the story, not telling it after the fact, but telling it as it's unfolding, and how that can be possible. Jeremy Scahill, who's at the Intercept as well, does. We're teaming up on a story that we can't go into details about, but it's a deep dive investigative story that we're pairing up a filmmaker who we have tremendous respect and belief in, and so they're working now, and we'll release those two things together.
Oh, okay. So you're going to be able to see it on the Intercept, and there's other platforms that you're going to release this content on. Can you talk a little bit about those?
I think we really just wanted to see what the best place for each film is. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have a site. It goes live tomorrow, 1 p.m. if all goes well.
Sorry, just to jump in.
Yeah.
What films are they going to be able to see? How many films do you have ready to go?
We're launching with 2, but we're not going to tell you what they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, you figured that. Anyway, we'll have 2 films up tomorrow. But one of the things I think with all of these projects is, we're interested in working with partners. Some films may make sense that they will premiere somewhere else first, and then they'll come to us. May be a case that we work with somebody to get them into some kind of theatrical presentation. I think the nice thing about what we're doing in terms of that is that there's a certain amount of freedom that we have with the people we work with at First Look Media, and they've been very encouraging about that the films find good homes and that we do what's best for the films and the filmmakers. So we haven't set anything up specifically for a film yet, but it's something that we're starting to talk with people about.
I mean, for instance, with Asylum, which it's still in production. What we showed at the film festival is in preview, and so that will be released in 2016, and it might be released with another partner in partnership of Field Division in partnership with another outlet that will reach a larger audience that maybe we would on our site.
I want to open it up to questions, and I'll come back with a few other questions too. Who has a question for our panelists here? Don't be shy. All right. Think about it and come back with your question. All right. Well, there was one? Yes, go ahead. Let's wait for the microphone real quick because it's being recorded and you all agreed to it.
I'm from the Philippines. So I'm wondering if this is an opportunity for amateur documentary filmmakers to be able to collaborate and raise issues from other countries.
I mean, we're really, really interested in foregrounding sort of cinema and craft, but that doesn't exclude really anyone. I mean, it can be younger filmmakers, it can be very, veterans in the field. But we do want things that are really working with the with cinematic, what's possible with cinema. So we want things that are, visual, in terms of well recorded, those kinds of things. But it doesn't exclude, for instance, working with, people. You said amateur. Did you describe it as? Yeah, I mean, I think that we would be open to. There's a tradition of what we would call like citizen journalists that produce incredible cinematography, and if we got a knock on our door, we'd be thrilled to show that. So we're not excluding anything, but we do want it to feel that it will both have some sort of relevance in the present, but that also will not just be living in a news cycle. We want things that have more universal, lasting potential.
To that point, Laura, I read there's a fascinating interview with the three of you on the Intercept, and if you want to know more about field of vision, it's a fantastic little gateway. But the thing that you said, Laura, that I was interested in is that you said that you're not really interested in arcing things out sometimes. That you're not interested in necessarily having a resolution. So describe what that means in terms of these short pieces.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I sometimes with short form, I think it might be interesting to just sort of enter into a situation and then leave it. And oftentimes when we do long form, we feel like it has to have 3 acts, that it has to have a situation, conflict, and resolution. And I'm not sure that that's actually the best structure for online short form. I'm not actually convinced at all. And so I think we're interested in maybe we'd publish a film that had 3 long shots, for instance, and that was it. It didn't have a sort of a full arc, and so we're interested in different types of how people are thinking about structure.
So if it doesn't have an arc, what are you looking for in terms of that thing that grabs an audience member?
We're still figuring that out. I mean, to be quite honest. So say for instance, we just did a film about the refugee crisis, but that's, for an example, a film that you could potentially tell with a fixed camera. And you just the sort of people and movements. If you had a camera in the right place, would be an example of how you could approach that. And so, but we're looking for filmmakers to help answer those questions. Yeah. What is really the best way if you wanted to capture a moment? And
what was interesting about the stuff that you showed last night was that how divergent the styles were. Which I really appreciated. Who else has a question? Yes, right here.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the range of subject material that you're interested in exploring.
I think we're very, very open. I mean, we do want things to have a topical bent to them. So if it's not something that's happening particularly now, but it's something that's speaking to a larger subject matter that is topical. So we know visual journalism is very much what we are looking for. But in terms of approach, we're very open to very different ways of working, and we also really want to have an international bent. So we are interested in stories from all over the world.
How quickly can you activate a crew to go and grab some? Yeah.
The first film from the time we talked to the filmmakers to when they were on the ground was a week. Mm-hmm. So I think we could go even a little bit faster now. Because we have a little bit more systems in place. We did that basically before we had all the scaffolding up, really before we'd even moved in. So, but yeah, no, I think if we saw something happening and found a filmmaker, we could have them on a plane the next day. Yeah.
Other questions? No other questions. They're coming. Wait, there's one. What?
How do you see sort of building? Are you building sort of a new audience, or sort of bringing along sort of the niche sort of documentary audience that has always been sort of watching docs on Netflix and other things?
I mean, I think building our own audience is going to take time. It does. People need to get used to seeing content from us. But my belief is always that the audience is there. I think there's this weird myth that there isn't for this kind of content. Especially as a programmer, I've seen that. So I think, people will find us, but I do think people are consuming content in so many different ways, whether it's still in a broadcast news sense, or whether you're getting your news on Snapchat, which a lot of people do. So I think there's just people are used to finding what they're interested in from a whole different variety of platforms. And we are going to be publishing on different platforms too. So I think we'll just fit into one, the audience is there, but hopefully people will get used to seeing a different perspective on this too.
You each bring different talents to this, to Field of Vision. Can you talk about what your individual role is within the company? AJ, you start.
Craft service.
Craft service. Yeah. Hot dogs, not a pizza. Laura?
No, the nice thing is that we're partners. We created this together. We commissioned together. We watch films together. The difference things that we'll do is that one of us will sort of be the point person for a film and kind of take it under our wing and be the one who's kind of, call me if you need something and let's check in. And, I think Charlotte does have an incredible skill of like finding filmmakers, and who are, I don't know where she finds them, but just knowing, having a really good ear to the ground about what people are thinking about and talking about, and new talent and new work, and that's extraordinarily exciting to us. And I think Laura and I are both filmmakers, and part of that has really led us to make sure that this is a filmmaker-driven company. That the initiative is not just driven by the desires of clicks or anything really about trying to create a platform by which filmmakers can experiment, make great work, and do things that maybe they wouldn't have an opportunity to do anywhere else. So I think our filmmaking background is really key to how we've tried to set up this initiative.
Yeah, and so for instance, things like access are really, key to us. Like, so if we have a story and we think we can get access, then we'll be able to do more than we can do as filmmakers. We'll think, this is an amazing situation. Let's reach out and see if we could get access. And if we can, then we can bring a filmmaker in. So that kind of being able to expand the type of, I think, visual journalism that's possible. It's really exciting. And even at the party last night, we threw a gathering, and there are things that came up out of that. There's like, oh, there might be a story there might be a story there, and that we can actually act on it quickly is great. And the three of us, we can greenlight projects, so we could just, we don't have to go through a complicated process to get something moving, and so that's really exciting. And then, and they're very much commissioned, so the filmmakers can decide who to bring on in terms of their team and how to allocate budgets. We are trying to cover really the expenses of what these, what the real costs are. But we're very active in the giving notes and viewing things. So filmmakers will submit a rough cut. We all give notes, and it goes through many back and forth with looking at footage, which is something that as filmmakers we all there's incredible value of showing rough cuts and rough cut screening. So we are very active in that part of the process.
Do you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say it's incredible working with two filmmakers on this, to have that eye. Both Laura and AJ have worked with every outlet imaginable, so it brings that kind of pros and cons and how filmmakers get the best experience possible, and to have that eye guiding the whole process is really phenomenal.
Do you guys think that there will be a section for pitching?
We wanted to make that as easy as possible, so there is simply an email address on the website that comes straight to us. So we want to hear from people and what they're thinking about and what they want to do. So it's really that simple.
Yeah, but I would say if people are going to pitch us, they talk about how it's going to be told visually. Yeah. It's not just an idea about something, and but really how you're going to tell it. So if you actually have some footage or you can show work, that's going to help a lot.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's just another question that came up. So, do you think how is a story too? Is a story needs to be too global, or if I'm running, like if I am investigating a case for 10 years, but it's something that happened in a region in Brazil that I'm following like for 10 years, would that be something that you guys would be interested in, or how far we can go?
I mean, I think my first question to that would be, do you want to tell 10 years of work now in a short form? I think that would be my instant question to you. Or is there a piece of that story you feel like should be told now, and so therefore we maybe would talk to you about that piece of the story? So we'd be open to the best way for you to tell that story, I think.
Yeah, I can talk about an example. So I made a film for the Op Docs for the New York Times, which was about Guantanamo, and it was a combination of older footage that I'd shot and a new story, or a new development in the story. So I'd filmed families in Yemen who were being visited with by a lawyer, and they had family members at Guantanamo. So it was this footage with families, and then I heard that somebody had died at a very young age at Guantanamo, and I had filmed with the family. So the film that I made for them followed the return home of the body of the Guantanamo prisoner, and it was intercut with the archival footage, not archival, but the older footage that I had shot, and that provided an example of, you know, like something that was immediate, had immediate kind of, but was drawing upon more of a historical breadth, and so I think things like that, if there is something that maybe would bring it into sort of a present tense, I think would be probably more where it would be inclined to go.
There was a question in the back. Yes. Wait, 1 second.
Would you take part of a feature and say break it down to a 10-minute, short from that, or has it got to be just a short?
I think we'd be interested if there was, say you were in production and something happened that you really thought, this is a tangent that probably won't make the feature and really should get out there and exist on its own, or it's something that I need to tell now. In terms of doing like kind of cut downs, I think there are people who already do that incredibly well.
So just on that point, so if somebody pulls some content out of a feature that they're developing and it goes up on Field of Vision, then they can still have the footage from from the feature that they're cutting together. I mean, how does that licensing work? So
so the way that we're working with filmmakers, the filmmakers keep the copyright of the work that they publish with us. We have a license agreement with just the published work, and that the raw footage belongs to the filmmakers. So I think we're not interested in like kind of a cut and paste from a feature, but if there's material that's sort of outside of or is released before, that'd be something that we would be. It wouldn't restrict the filmmaker from continuing to pursue their long form project.
Other questions? You guys are going to be able to make your movies while you do this too? Okay.
Yeah, it's very important. Yeah, no, it is. It's very important. I mean, bringing a filmmaker perspective as strong as these two to the table they have to still make the work. I want to keep seeing the work. So, yeah, absolutely.
Laura's putting some of Asylum onto Field of Vision. AJ, do you have some of your stuff that you're going to put up?
I mean, at some point, probably. I'm doing some political work that will end up somewhere else. But to your question, the nice thing is I just actually finished shooting something this summer as we were kind of gearing up. So we handed it off to the editor, and I was like, "I'll see you in December." It was just like a nice timing to be able to really delve into this, and it's such a creative thrill to like work with filmmakers and talk to them about what they're thinking and their process, and seeing like what their ideas are, and seeing how they approach various situations. So I mean, that's another great thing I think for both of us is, when you work with other creative people, it just makes you better and makes you excited about the work you want to do. So I think we're really lucky to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right here. Hold on. We have to get the technical question in the mic. There you go.
Where are you based?
Oh.
Our offices are here in New York. AJ is based in LA also.
Talk about one more. Let me ask something and then you can ask. Talk about the other partner in this, the Intercept. Tell us what the Intercept is, for those that don't know, and how are they your partners in this project?
Okay, so there are two companies that we're working with. So there's First Look Media, which is the larger company that was formed in 2013. And then after that, the Intercept emerged, and that's Glenn Greenwald, Jeremy Scahill, and I are co-founders or co-editors of that. And the way that we're relating, we're going to be partnering on stories, and we'll be releasing we have our own landing page, but it will be within the Intercept. Mm-hmm. But we have our somewhat. I mean, the editorial process. We're the fact checking is happening through the staff of the Intercept, and but the actual commissioning and what stories we decide to go forward with are the three of us.
Okay, all right. Yes, right here.
What was it about the material on Julian Assange that made you want to do it episodically?
It actually came out of the conversation of developing what we were building. We started talking about like what kind of storytelling are we really excited about right now, and we all agree like that episodic is probably one of the most interesting directions that's happening in nonfiction storytelling, and we all just love it, and it works in different types of ways than long form. I mean, I love long form as well, but then we said like, well, we should really think about how to do episodic, and then after that conversation, then I said, wow, this material with that shows Julian and could potentially really be great for that, and then I started editing, and then we said, oh, this is really exciting, and it allows kind of working with footage in a way that maybe with long form you have to really sometimes really sacrifice what is amazing material because it has to serve a longer, and this opens up different types of possibilities, and also different types of working with time gaps and how to introduce new characters, and there's just something really exciting about that, because once the audience knows the main characters and are into the story, then you can do, in a sense, like some more unpredictable things, and it just feels, for me as creative person, just really exciting. And obviously there's a dramatic through line in terms of Julian's situation in the case, and then the other main thing was being interested in working with material that was shot and then bringing it up to the present time, and following what's happening with Julian now as he continues to publish. I mean, he's been in the embassy now for over 3 years, and he's continuing to publish.
When am I going to see that?
Next year, probably. Yeah. I mean, probably sometime early 2016, hopefully. Yeah.
I guess my question is there a point of view concern with the journalists as opposed to the filmmakers? Is there a way that those two stories become bifurcated?
We're not that worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that in a sense that's a question about collaboration, and that's something to be worked between the writer and the filmmaker in that case. I think what we want to be careful of is that they're not trying to be one-to-one. I think that they should have their own voices and their own journeys, and that it's additive, and it doesn't feel like they're covering the same points. So, other than that, I think that how to navigate, there are times when having a camera in the room can be beneficial, and there are times where maybe it's not beneficial, and that's something that would be up to the filmmaker and the writer to navigate.
Yeah, for those, I'm sure you have seen, but the Times has been publishing some long-form stories with some short docs inside of them that were incredibly effective. The one I remember recently was, not recently, but it was Boys in the Bunkhouse, which did a 30-minute documentary on the subjects of this story, which really gives it such a great texture. Any other questions? We're going to wrap it up pretty soon. No other questions? One. Let's go over here.
Hi, I was just wondering, in terms of topics, you tend to stick to ones that you know about. Since, say, Laura, you're a journalist, and you usually talk about political issues. Do you explore other avenues, different topics such as environment, or just? Can't hear you. Sorry.
We're just beginning, so that's a question. I mean, we're interested in a real broad range of topics, and yeah.
Brilliant. I think we have time for one more. We have to wrap it up. One more question. I think there was one more over here.
I was just wondering about sort of long-term. The sort of business model, or how this is going to work. You're releasing it all online, which is beautiful that people will get a chance to see it, but how are you going to keep commissioning 40, 50 films a year? Or what do you see for the future for the website?
I mean, we've got great support. We have a commissioning budget. We work with wonderful people at First Look Media. They really believe in this project. They're just also kind of starting what I think will be a lot of exciting things that they'll be involved in. They're one of the companies behind the new film Spotlight. I think we are in a really fortunate position that we have a budget that we can use. It's a real budget that we can actually pay filmmakers what it costs to make the films. It would really upset us if we found out later that a filmmaker went out of pocket for anything, because it's not the privilege of making a film for us is not your salary. And that's not always the case. And so that's really, as filmmakers, that's really super important to us. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, look, man, we're just starting. It's like, I don't know where we're going to be like in 3 years or 4 years. But it's, but in, you know, in month 6 and day -1 of launch, it's a pretty exciting place to be.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming, and let's just remind everybody it's launching tomorrow. Fieldofvision.com. No, what's the URL?
It's intercept.com.
Theintercept.com.
/Field of Vision.
Got it. All right, so go check it out. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.